Have you ever been in the middle of an argument with someone you deeply love and suddenly you hear yourself saying something your mother or father used to say, word for word, same tone, same energy? Or maybe you have shut down completely in a conversation, gone quiet, and felt this heaviness in your chest, and now you had no idea why something so small hit you so hard. What's happening in those moments isn't weakness, it isn't immaturity, it's data, old data running on autopilot. And today, we are going to understand exactly what that means and, more importantly, what you can do about it. So, there's a book called I Am Okay, You Are Okay by Thomas Harris. It's a classic in the world of psychology and transactional analysis. And one of its most powerful ideas is this: your mind is like a computer, and from the moment you are born, it starts recording data in three distinct files. These files stay with you for your entire life. They shape how you love, how you argue, how you apologize, how you parent, and how you receive care. But before we open these three files, I want to add something here, something the book doesn't explicitly cover, but which I feel is deeply important, especially if you are someone who is planning a child or is currently expecting. As a homeopathic practitioner and holistic healer, I have seen and studied enough to say this with conviction that recording doesn't begin at birth. It begins at conception. The womb is not a waiting room, it is the first classroom. Modern research in the field of prenatal psychology and ancient wisdom traditions that holistic healing is rooted in both point to the same truth. A developing baby is extraordinarily sensitive to its environment, not just physically, but emotionally as well. Think about it this way: when a mother is chronically anxious during pregnancy, her body releases stress hormones. That same biochemical environment is what the baby is floating in, growing in, and forming in. The nervous system that is being built inside the womb is being built inside that emotional climate. A mother who feels safe, loved, and at peace during pregnancy is literally bathing her baby in a different internal chemistry than a mother who is under constant stress, fear, and emotional turmoil. There is a reason why in our ancient Indian traditions, during the period of Garbha Sanskar, expectant mothers were surrounded by music, beauty, positive speech, and emotional nourishments. Our ancestors understood long before science could measure it that the mother's inner world becomes the child's first outer world. And perhaps the most profound example of this in our own tradition is Abhimanyu from Mahabharata, who learned the technique of breaking into the Chakravyu formation while still in his mother Subhadra's womb as his father Arjun narrated it. The recording had already begun. So, if you're expecting or planning a family, please understand this. The data your child will carry for the rest of their life has already started being written. The peace you cultivate in yourself right now is not just for you, it is the first gift you give to your child. And if you are an adult sitting with patterns and wounds you cannot explain, patterns that seem to have no origin story you can point to, it is possible that some of that data was written before you even took your first breath. Now, this is not said to burden anyone, but it is said to bring compassion for yourself and for others. Now, let's understand the three files that Thomas Harris talks about. File 1, Parent Data, the Taught Concept. Think about the rules you live by today. Have you ever stopped to ask, are these actually my rules or did I just inherit them? This is your parent data. Everything you were taught, not always through words, but through observation, repetition, and experience. Your parents, grandparents, teachers, and elders, they were all writing into this file whether they intended to or not. Have you ever looked at your child or looked at yourself and thought, where did that come from? This is precisely why it is said that children don't listen to you, they watch you. They are not taking notes on your instructions. They are mirroring your behavior, your patterns, your reactions, your silences, your fears. All of it gets absorbed and stored in their parent file because you are their first and most powerful reference point for how life is lived. So, here is something worth reflecting on. If you notice a behavior in your child that disturbs you, that feels wrong or inappropriate, before you correct them, pause and look within. Ask yourself honestly, is this pattern present in me somewhere? Not always, but more often than you would expect. The answer is yes. And this is not said to make you feel guilty, it is said to give you power. Because if that pattern came from you, it means it can also change with you. When you do the inner work, when you heal and shift, the child's environment shifts. Their file starts receiving new data. If you change, the world around you changes. And for a child, you are their world. Some of it is beautiful. Always help someone in need, work hard, and good things come. Family comes first. All these become your values and your compass. But here's where it gets complicated. Imagine a father who tells his son, real men don't cry, be strong. But that same father, when stressed, shouts, slams door, and loses control entirely. And here's the uncomfortable truth. What hits harder in a child's mind? What a parent says or what a parent does? This contradiction gets recorded, both of them, and the child grows up carrying this impossible instruction, which is to suppress your emotions but also has no model for what healthy emotional expression even looks like. Now that boy grows up and his partner is upset and crying. Instead of holding space, he feels deeply uncomfortable and says, stop overreacting, just calm down. He is not being cruel intentionally. He is just playing back the data that was written into him 20 years ago. Now consider this. A girl grows up watching her mother silently sacrifice everything, her career, her opinions, her needs, all quietly given up for the family. Nobody told her that this is what a good wife does. It was never said out loud, but it was shown every single day. Nobody told her, nobody sat her down and said, this is what you must do. So, where did that belief come from? How did it get so deep that she couldn't even question it? Now she grows up believing that love means erasing one's self, that asking for her own needs to be met is selfish. This is exactly what is parent data, and it is operating silently in a relationship, and neither partner even knows it's happening. The key insight here is parent data isn't always wrong, but the problem is we follow it unconsciously, as if it's the only truth, as if it's our truth, when really it was someone else's belief that we absorbed before we had the wisdom to question it. Now, the book gives a wonderful example of this. Let's dive into it. A mother had a firm rule at her home: never put a hat on the table and never put a coat on the bed. She followed it her entire life without question and expected her daughter to follow it too. Anyone who broke this rule was met with a reaction far stronger than the situation seemed to warrant. Finally, after several decades of living by this unexamined rule, the daughter asked her mother, "Why do we never put a hat on the table or a coat on the bed?" The answer was that when the grandmother was young, there were neighbor children who were infested with lice, and placing a hat or coat carelessly on shared surface risked everything, and it also risked the spreading of infestation. It was a sensible and practical rule, but for that time, for that context. But the context had long since disappeared, yet the rule lived on, followed faithfully, never questioned, simply because it had always been that way. This is parent data in its most innocent form. Nobody meant any harm. Everyone was simply passing on what they had received. But notice, it took decades before someone finally asked why. And this is the invitation for all of us to become the person who asks why. Not to discard every rule we have inherited, but to consciously examine which ones still serve us and which ones we are simply carrying out of habit, out of loyalty, or out of fear of questioning what has always been. And here's what makes this even more significant. This book tells us that by the age of 5, the fundamental frame of mind with which a child will live his or her entire life is already set. Not suggested, not drafted, but set in concrete. Think about what that means for a moment. The beliefs about whether the world is safe or dangerous, whether they are worthy of love or not, whether they must fight to be heard or whether their voice matters, whether relationships are a source of joy or a source of pain. All of that largely decided before a child has even started going to school. This is not fate, but it is a very loud reminder of how seriously we must take the environment, be it emotional, physical, or relational, that we create for our children in those early years. And equally, it is an invitation for every adult to look at their own concrete with compassion and understand that what feels like who you are may simply be what was poured into you before you were old enough to choose. File 2: Child Data, the Felt Concept. Let me ask you something. Have you ever felt a wave of emotion, sadness, fear, or anger, and when you tried to trace it back, you couldn't find a reason? like the feeling was bigger than the moment that triggered it. This is your child data speaking. This is the most primal of the three files. Data collected not through language or logic, but through feeling, through your senses, through the emotional experiences of your early years. The book gives us a profound insight into how child data gets formed in the very earliest years of life. Thomas Harris tells us what the child needs the most right from the moment they enter this world is simply but deeply powerful: to be acknowledged, to be seen, to be held, and to be responded to. Every time a caregiver picks up a crying baby, every time warmth is offered consistently, every time a child's need is met with presence and care, the child's nervous system records something fundamental, which is I am safe, I matter, and I am okay. But when that acknowledgement is absent, when cries go unanswered, when needs are consistently ignored, when a child reaches out emotionally but finds nobody there, a very different recording gets made, which is I am not safe, I am a burden, and I am not okay. And here is what is so important to understand: the child is not making a conscious decision about any of this. There is no logic, no reasoning, no choice involved. This is a pure felt experience being stored in the body. This is the earliest and most fundamental layer of child data. Now that child grows up and they become an adult with a career, relationships, responsibilities, but somewhere deep inside, that original recording is still running. And in moments of vulnerability, when they feel ignored by a partner, when they are not invited to something, when someone doesn't respond to their message, this ancient feeling resurfaces. Not proportionate to the present moment, but proportionate to what was first felt decades ago in a small body that just needed to be seen. This is why the book says the child data is not a concept. It is a reality inside every adult, still waiting to be acknowledged. Think about it. A baby cannot understand words, but a baby absolutely understands tone of voice, warmth of touch, the feeling of being picked up when it cries versus being left alone. All of that gets recorded. Imagine a child who every time she was upset was told, go to your room and stop being dramatic. Her feelings were consistently dismissed. She learned that her emotions were a burden, that expressing herself led to rejection. Now she is in a romantic relationship, and every time she needs to bring up something difficult, a hurt feeling, a need, a boundary, she just freezes. Her heart races, but she convinces herself it's not worth bringing up. Maybe he'll think I'm too sensitive, and I don't want that. I'll just deal it with myself. She is not broken. She is not difficult. She is just running a file that was written when she was too small to have any say in the matter. Does that sound like anyone you know? Or perhaps like yourself? Now, consider a child who grew up in a home where a parent's mood was unpredictable, sometimes warm and loving, sometimes cold and critical, with no apparent reason. That child became an expert at reading the room, walking on eggshells, scanning faces, anticipatory moods, because in his world, a shift in someone's energy meant something was coming. Now, as an adult, if his partner is slightly quiet or seems off, even if it has nothing to do with him, he spirals. Did I just do something wrong? Are they angry at me? Is everything okay with us? He can't decide to stop worrying because this isn't a thought, it's a feeling stored in the body, and feelings don't respond to logic, do they? And here's where I want to pause and speak to you as a practitioner for a moment. When a child grows up in this kind of emotional environment, which is chronically uncertain, perpetually on alert, never quite knowing what is coming next, that state of hypervigilance doesn't just stay an emotional pattern. Over time, it becomes the nervous system's default setting. The body learns to live in a constant state of low grade alarm, and when this continues into adulthood, when this vigilance becomes the lens through which every relationship, every silence, every unanswered message is filtered, it can, in some individuals, lay the groundwork for conditions like generalized anxiety disorder or obsessive compulsive disorder. Not in every case, but far more often than we realize. This is not just psychology, this is biology. This is what unprocessed child data can do to a nervous system over a lifetime. And this is precisely why awareness, true deep awareness of where our patterns come from, is not just emotional work, it is healthcare. The key insight here is child data lives in the body. It bypasses rational thought entirely. This is why you can know something isn't a big deal and still feel like it's the end of the world. That disconnect between what your adult mind knows and what your body feels is child data speaking. File 3, Adult Data, the taught concept. Now here's a question worth sitting with. In your last serious argument with someone you love, how much of your response was truly yours? How much of it was actually present, clear, and chosen? This third file, adult data, is the one you actually build yourself through your own thinking, your own observations, your own conscious reasoning. This is the part of you that can look at a situation and ask what is actually happening here, separate from what I was taught, and separate from what I feel. This is your most powerful tool, but it's also the one most people access the least, especially in the moments of conflict. Here's a simple example most of us will recognize it. Your partner comes home after a very long day. They are quiet over dinner. They don't ask you how your day was. They barely make eye contact. Now watch what happens inside you. If child data takes over, you feel a familiar sting. They are ignoring me. I must have done something wrong. Maybe they don't care anymore. And you either go cold and distant yourself, or you pick up a fight about something completely unrelated. The dishes, the television volume, anything. Because the real feeling has nowhere to go. If parent data takes over, you might hear an old voice in your head that says, if someone doesn't talk to you, don't chase them. Maintain your dignity. And so you shut down completely. Walls up, silence spreading across the room like a fog. But if adult data activates, you pause. You look at your partner. Really look at your partner. And you think, They seem exhausted. This probably has nothing to do with me. Let me simply ask. And so you do. You put your hand on their arm and say, "You seem tired today. Are you okay?" Three words, and suddenly the entire evening changes direction because you responded to what was real, not to what your old data told you was happening. This is adult data, not complicated, not cold, just present, just clear, just chosen. And this is what adult data essentially does. It brings you back to the here and now. Think about it. Parent data lives in the past. It is made up of everything that was taught, modeled, and recorded in another time, another context, and sometimes even another generation. Child data also lives in the past. It is the echo of what was once felt, once feared, and once experienced in a body that no longer exists as it did then. Both of these files, when they run unchecked, pull you out of present moment. They make you respond to then instead of now, to what happened before instead of what is actually happening in front of you. Adult data is the only file that is rooted in the present, in reality, in what is. And when you are truly present, when you are operating from your adult data, something remarkable happens. You stop reacting and you start responding because you are no longer blindly defending an old wound or unconsciously following a rule that may no longer serve the moment. You are simply here, listening, seeing the person in front of you as they actually are, not as a trigger, not as a threat, not as a reminder of someone from your past. You begin to listen empathetically, not to reply, not to defend, but to genuinely understand. And this is not a new idea. Across traditions, from ancient philosophy to modern mindfulness, from yoga to psychology, the one piece of wisdom that appears again and again is this: the present moment is the only place where life actually happens, the only place where connection is possible, the only place where healing begins. Thomas Harris arrived at this truth through the lens of psychology and transactional analysis. And what this book tells us is your adult data is your doorway to the presence. Use it. The relationship revelation. So now let's zoom out and look at what's actually happening in most relationship conflicts. Picture this. A couple has the same argument repeatedly about dishes, about being late, about feeling unheard. From the outside, it looks trivial, but it never gets resolved, and every time it happens, it feels bigger and more painful than it should. Here's what's actually happening beneath the surface. Partner A says something critical. That criticism activates partner B's child data, an old wound that says, "I am not good enough and I always mess up." So, partner B either shuts down completely or lashes back defensively. Partner A sees the defensiveness and their parent data kicks in, an old recording that says, "when someone won't take accountability, you push harder." So, they escalate. Now you have child data and parent data in a loop, feeding each other, amplifying each other, while two intelligent, loving adults are barely present in the room. Neither of them is a bad person. Both of them, in that moment, being run by old recordings that have nothing to do with the relationship in front of them. This is why the same argument keeps happening. This is why you feel completely misunderstood even when you both are trying. You are not really talking to each other, but you are reacting through your data. And before we go further, I want to pause here and say something important. When I say relationship, I don't only mean romantic relationships. I don't mean only husband and wife or a boyfriend and girlfriend relationship. I mean every relationship that matters to you. The friend you have known for 20 years but somehow always end up in the same unresolved tension with. The sibling you love deeply but cannot seem to have one conversation with without it turning into an argument. The parent whose approval you have spent a lifetime seeking without ever quite feeling you have it. The child you are trying your best with but somehow keep repeating patterns you promised yourself you never would. Every single one of these relationships is being shaped by the same three files: parent data, child data, and adult data. And in every single of these relationships, the same possibility exists: the possibility of awareness, the possibility of choice, and the possibility of something genuinely different. The honest truth about this work, and here is something which I want to say with complete honesty because I think it needs to be said. This work, the work of awareness, of understanding which file is running, of choosing to respond instead of react, it cannot be done by just one person in a relationship. It needs both. Because when only one person is doing the work, when only one person is pausing, reflecting, understanding themselves, understanding the other, making allowances, choosing patience, they are essentially working for two people simultaneously. They are carrying the emotional weight of the entire relationship on their own shoulders, and that is not sustainable. No matter how aware you are, no matter how committed you are to growth, there will come a point where that one person, the one who has been trying, understanding, adjusting, always being the bigger person, simply gets tired. Not because they stop loving you, but because they are human. And humans are not built to carry what was meant to be shared. So, if you're watching this and you genuinely want your relationship to last, whether it is a marriage, friendship, a bond with a sibling, or a parent, share this video with that person. Not as an acquisition, not as a way of saying you need to fix yourself, but as an invitation, as a way of saying, I want us both to understand this together. I want us to grow together. Because two people who are both willing to do this work, who are both committed to showing up as their adult, to questioning their inherited data, to seeing each other clearly in the present moment, that is not just a healthier relationship, that is an extraordinary one. The shift and awareness is the key. Now, here's the part that I find most profound about this book's message. You cannot delete these files because they are permanent. Parent data stays, child data stays, but, and this is liberation, awareness gives you the power to choose which file runs your life. When you become conscious of which data is speaking in the moment, you can choose not to let it drive your actions, not erase it, not pretend it isn't there, but consciously step aside from it. So the practice becomes this. In a heated moment, in a quiet moment, when you feel that familiar surge of something old and heavy, ask yourself these three questions. Am I reacting from something that I was taught? Is this the parent data? Or am I reacting from something that I once felt? An old wound, maybe an old fear? Is this the child data? And the third, which is the very important question, is am I responding to what is actually genuinely happening right now? Is this my adult? That pause, that question, that's where relationships transform. Because when you can say to your partner, I notice I'm reacting from an old place right now, please give me a moment. You have just done something extraordinary. You have brought your adult into the room. And when two adults are truly present in a relationship, real understanding becomes possible. Saving a relationship doesn't always mean grand gestures or dramatic breakthroughs. Sometimes it means pausing just for 3 seconds before you speak. Sometimes it means recognizing that the anger you feel right now has a history older than this moment. Sometimes it means giving your partner the grace of knowing that they too are carrying data they did not choose. That's empathy rooted in understanding. And that kind of empathy changes everything. If this video made you think about your own patterns, I'd love to know. And you need to drop a comment below and tell me which data do you think shows up most in your relationships, parent, child, or adult. And if someone in your life needs to hear this today, please share it with them. It might be the most important thing they watch this week. See you in the next one.